It was 11:46 p.m. when she called. Not messaged. Not left a voice note. She called. And that alone was enough to make my stomach turn. Julia hated phone calls. Said they made her feel like someone was breathing down her neck, especially late at night. So when I saw her name lighting up my screen in the dark, my first instinct wasn't to answer. It was to brace. "Hello?" I said, already sitting up. There was a pause. And then I heard it. The kind of breathing you don't forget. Quick, uneven, fragile, like a bird caught in the walls, fluttering against something it can't see. Double quotes, Ethan. Please come. Pleac, I need you. It's just come now, please. No explanation, no location, just please. But I knew where she was. The tone in her voice didn't come from a grocery store, or a street, or a friend's house. It came from our house, the one she still lived in after the separation. I didn't ask questions. I didn't even change out of my clothes. I grabbed my keys and drove through the kind of silence that screams. Every red light was a trap, every passing car a threat. I didn't know what I was racing toward. I just knew that something had broken. Loose, something sharp and real. We hadn't spoken much since she asked for space. It had been about 4 months. Civil texts about bills and the dog. The occasional check-in about her dad's recovery. Nothing that could explain this. Nothing. That sounded like fear. I pulled into the driveway, headlights slicing through the thick curtain of night. The porch light was off, curtains drawn, but the door was slightly open. My heart started sprinting before I did. I stepped in slow, whispering her name. Julia? No answer. Just the hum of the fridge and the faint smell of burned coffee. The air was wrong, too still, like the house itself was holding its breath. And then I saw her. She was in the living room, crouched on the floor, hair tangled, hands trembling, wearing the same sweater I'd bought her last winter, the one with the little red stitching on the sleeve. Her eyes were wild, not like someone who'd been crying, like someone who had stopped crying hours ago and couldn't find her way back. He was there, sitting on the couch like he owned it, wearing a smug, empty grin that made my fists clench without thinking. He didn't look surprised, didn't even stand, just glanced at me with those dull, unbothered eyes, like I was just another piece of the evening. Who the hell is this? I asked, trying to stay level, even as the ground beneath me cracked. Ethan, don't, she whispered, almost crawling toward me. I need your help. He's not what he says. Please don't make a scene. Just trust me. Okay? Trust her? After 4 months of silence? After walking into my own home, because it still was mine in a way, and finding another man calmly planted in the middle of it, every part of me screamed to yell, to grab the guy by the collar, and throw him out into the night. But her eyes, God, her eyes, there was something there I hadn't seen in a long time, something desperate, and not the kind of desperation that comes from regret or second thoughts. It was the kind that comes from being trapped. So I nodded, said nothing to him, just offered her my hand, and she took it, ice cold. She gripped it like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to this world. Let's talk, I murmured, leading her toward the kitchen. I needed answers, but more than that, I needed to understand what I was really looking at, because nothing about this made sense. And that's when I noticed it, the way he watched her. Not like a lover, not like a guest, like a captor. Bored, confident, dangerous. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. This wasn't about betrayal. This was about control, not about fear, about something far uglier than I was prepared for. But I would be prepared. Whatever this was, I wasn't going to let it swallow her whole. Not again. Not after everything we'd already lost. I closed the kitchen door behind us and looked her in the eyes. Tell me everything. Her lip trembled. And what she said next didn't just change the night. It shattered everything I thought I knew about her, about him, about the last 4 months, and about what really tore us apart. She hesitated. Then, slowly, she sat down at the kitchen table, folding into herself like she was trying to disappear. Her voice came out small, like something had frayed it from the inside. His name's Adrian, or at least, that's what he told me. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Just kept picking at the frayed seam of her sweater, the one I'd always meant to fix. We met in February, she continued, at that little art gallery downtown. I didn't know he was watching me before that. Following me? Not at first. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed tight to stop the shaking. Julia, you're telling me he stalked you? She nodded. A hollow motion, like she didn't have the energy to explain how she'd gotten there, just that she had. And she was drowning in it. I thought he was sweet, quiet, a little intense, but I was lonely. And you were... Her voice cracked. You were gone. I said nothing. The weight of that sentence hung in the air between us. And she was... Right, I had been gone. Not physically. I was still around, still in town, still sleeping in that too-quiet apartment above the bookstore. But emotionally, I'd been absent long before the split. Worn out from the fights, the silence, the way we'd both stopped trying. I invited him in one night, just to talk. I told myself it was harmless, but then he kept showing up, unannounced, following me to work, leaving things on the porch. Things I'd never told him I liked, like the chamomile soap my mom used when I was a kid, or the exact brand of tea I only ever bought when I was sick. Her hands shook harder now. I told him to stop, blocked his number, changed the locks. He disappeared for 2 weeks. And then she looked up at me, finally, and there it was again. That quiet terror, that plea. He showed up with photos, Ethan, of me, of you, of my sister. Said he knew where my niece goes to school. He had my work schedule printed out. Told me if I went to the cops, something bad would happen. Not to me, but to someone I loved. I felt my stomach fold in on itself. This wasn't some ex-boyfriend situation. This was calculated, cold, the kind of thing that lives just outside the edge of ordinary life, until it walks through your front door and sits on your couch. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, barely above a whisper. She looked ashamed. Because I thought I could fix it. Thought I could control it if I stayed calm, if I didn't escalate. And because I thought maybe I deserved it. That last part hit harder than anything else. She thought she deserved it. And I knew then how far we drifted from each other, not in miles, but in self-worth. She had become someone who bore pain quietly, who didn't scream when she should have. Because somewhere along the way, we'd both forgotten how to ask for help. He said he just wanted to watch over me, she whispered. That it wasn't romantic, just protective. Like I owed him something for his concern. The kettle whined behind me, startling both of us. I hadn't even realized I'd turned it on. I poured her a cup of water, unsure if it would help, but needing to do something. So why tonight? I asked. Why call me now? She stared down into the steam. Because tonight he told me he wanted to prove a point, said he. Was tired of waiting. That he wanted you to see him, to see what real devotion looks like. She looked up again, and there were tears now. Angry ones. I think he wants to destroy everything. Not just me. Us. The life we had. The life we almost had. That's why he came here. He wanted you to find him. He wanted this to feel like betrayal. Like my betrayal. I sat down across from her, barely breathing. She was right. Everything about this felt carefully orchestrated, not impulsive, not emotional. Strategic. He wanted chaos. And now he had it. A heavy silence fell, one that carried everything we hadn't said in months. Regret, guilt, the quiet grief of two people who once loved each other so much they forgot how to be separate. I didn't know who else to call, she said finally. I didn't think you'd even answer. I'll always answer, I replied, and I meant it. Whatever had come between us, the missed chances, the exhausted nights, the words we both threw and swallowed, it didn't erase the history. The quiet mornings, the way her hand used to find mine under the covers, the way she still wore that red-stitched sweater. I stood. Get your things. You're not staying here tonight. Her mouth opened to argue, but then closed again. She nodded. We walked back into the living room, and Adrian was still there. Smiling. He didn't say a word as we walked past him, just followed us with his eyes, sharp, knowing, confident, like he wanted me to confront him, like it was part of the plan, but I didn't give him that satisfaction. Not yet. We got in the car, drove off in silence, and as the house shrank in, the rearview mirror, a sick thought crept into my mind. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. He'd wanted me to come, and now I had, which meant the next move wasn't hers or mine. It was his. And whatever he was planning, we were already in it. It wasn't till I got her back to my apartment that I realized how far she'd slipped from herself. Julia stood in the doorway like a guest in someone else's life, her arms crossed, scanning the room as if memorizing exits. She didn't take off her shoes, didn't sit. She just hovered. I offered her tea. She nodded politely, took one sip, then stared into the mug like it held a secret. And I remembered. One night, years ago, back when our biggest fights were about takeout or forgetting laundry in the machine, she came home late from work, eyes red, body sagging under the weight of something unspoken. I had already started dinner, pasta. The sauce burned because I couldn't stop watching her from across the kitchen. When I finally asked what was wrong, she didn't speak, just walked up, buried her face in my chest, and said, "Just let me stay quiet tonight, please." She was always like that, holding pain with both hands, afraid it would spill if she let anyone else carry it. But this wasn't quiet pain. This was rotting. "I need to shower," she said softly, already walking toward the bathroom. I heard the water start, and I sat down, hands folded, watching the steam curl under the door, trying to piece together how everything had unraveled beneath my nose. There had been signs, little things, like how she started checking over her shoulder in parking lots, or the way she stopped using social media entirely. At the time, I chalked it up to burnout or guilt. I figured maybe she just didn't want to see me moving on. But now, those things felt like Morse code, desperate signals I never learned to read. And what haunted me more was the feeling that this wasn't spontaneous, that Adrian had been planning this for months, maybe longer. He'd embedded himself in her life, inch by inch, the way mold creeps into drywall, invisible until it starts to suffocate everything. I got up, poured the tea down the sink. The taste of it had gone bitter in my mouth when she finally stepped out of the bathroom, hair damp, dressed in one of my old t-shirts. She looked like a ghost of the woman I loved. Her collarbone jutted out in sharp contrast. Her skin was pale, as if fear had been living inside her for so long it drained all the color out. "You can sleep in the bed," I told her. "I'll take the couch." She nodded. But she didn't move. "Julia," I said, gentler this time, "did he ever hurt you?" She didn't answer right away, just stared at the floor. Then, "No, not like that. He's too smart for that. It's all psychological." He doesn't threaten directly. He just implies. He leaves just enough doubt. Makes you question what you saw, what you heard. And after a while, you start to wonder if you're the one losing control. I swallowed hard. Gaslighting. Isolation. Invasion of privacy. He was playing a long game. A power game. And she'd been alone in it the whole time. I sat beside her, careful not to get too close. He doesn't know where I live, right? She nodded. No, I made sure. I told him. I'd gone to a hotel tonight. Still, I locked the door. Double-checked the windows. That night, I barely slept. I laid there, listening to the sound of her breathing in the next room. Shallow. Uneven. Like someone still bracing for a blow. And in the darkness, memories came back. The early days. Before. All the cracks. Before stress and ambition and miscommunication choked the love we had. I remembered our trip to Mendocino. Hiking through the redwoods, her hand warm in mine. How she kissed me in the middle of the trail because she said the moss smelled like rain and the silence felt holy. I remembered the day she painted the kitchen without telling me, just to surprise me. The walls were too bright, but her smile made up for it. I remembered her laugh, Dot, and the way it vanished, slowly, imperceptibly, in that final year. God, I thought, how did we let this happen? Morning came too fast. The room was gray. Quiet, Dot, she was already awake. Sitting on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, staring at her phone. There's a message, she said, voice flat. I walked over. On the screen, there it was. A single photo of me, Dot, sleeping. In my apartment. Taken last night. Dot, my blood ran cold. No text, she added, handing me the phone. Just the image. He'd been here, or someone had. While we slept, I checked the locks. No signs of forced entry, nothing missing. No broken windows. He didn't come to steal. He came to warn that my skin crawled. How is that even possible? I don't know, she whispered. But I think this was always part of his plan. I looked at her, heart pounding. What plan? She looked up at me, her face pale, eyes hollow. To destroy you. I didn't speak. Not right away. I just stared at the photo, my face softened by sleep, lips slightly parted, the edge of Julia's old sweater visible in the corner. The angle. It was too precise. Not from a window. Not from a door, Dot. From inside, Dot, something in me cracked open. That primal part. The part that's supposed to protect, hunt, defend. But right behind it came a colder instinct, one I hadn't felt since the weeks after the divorce, when I learned how to hold in rage and turn it into action. Control the chaos. Let the emotion wait. I set the phone down. We don't panic, I said. Calm. Too calm. That's what he wants. Julia nodded, but I could tell she was trembling under the surface, like her bones had forgotten how to be still. I scanned the room. Slowly. The coat rack by the door. The bookshelf. The plant stand in the corner. All normal. But my eyes stopped on the smoke detector, Dot. It was blinking. Just once every minute. Not odd, except I didn't have one in that room. I'd taken it down months ago when I burned toast and never put it back. Dot, my chest tightened. I climbed onto a chair and pulled the device down. It looked like a smoke detector from the outside, but inside was a tiny black lens, barely larger than a grain of rice. A hidden camera. Jesus, I muttered. Julia covered her mouth, eyes wide. He's been watching since last night. I nodded slowly. Maybe longer. I wrapped it in a towel, turned on the sink, and smashed it under the water until the light went out. The lens cracked. The casing split open. I tossed the remains into a plastic bag and zipped it shut. We were being surveilled, not just followed. Not just threatened. Watched. I'll call a friend, I said. Someone who works private security. Discreet. Not the police? She asked. I hesitated. We will, but not yet. Right now, if we make noise, he disappears. And we lose the thread. She didn't like it. I could see it in her face. But she trusted me. At least enough to follow my lead. I called Kevin. He answered on the third ring, voice rough from sleep. Ethan, you all right? Not even close, I said. I need help, and I needed quiet. Kevin didn't ask questions. We'd known each other too long. He gave me a name, a surveillance counterattack specialist in Oakland, and told me to bring everything I'd found. Julia was silent as we packed, but just before we left, she stopped and stared at her phone again. Can I show you something? She said softly. She unlocked her photo gallery and scrolled to a folder labeled March. It was full of screenshots, messages, voicemails, photos. Every one of them from Adrian. But they weren't normal messages. They were layered, threats wrapped in poetry. Photos with background details meant to intimidate, like a child's bike outside her sister's house, or her dad's car parked at a gas station across town. I scrolled through them in silence, my throat tightening with each one. She'd been documenting everything, quietly, carefully, preparing. You didn't just survive him, I murmured. You studied him. She looked away. I thought if I ever got the chance to get out, I'd need proof. I felt something new then. Pride. Not for what she'd endured. I hated that she ever had to, but for the strength she'd built inside that silence. We drove to Oakland in silence, passing through fog and early morning stillness, the counter-surveillance. Guy Anton was clinical, efficient, and thankfully not the chatty type. He swept my apartment, then her phone. Found 3 more bugs. 2 audio only. 1 GPS. All disabled. All removed. We drove back before sunset, neither of us saying much. Back at the apartment, I sat down at my desk and printed everything she'd documented, every screenshot, timestamp, and message. I organized it into a folder marked Incident. Chronology. Then I scanned it all and saved a copy to a secure cloud backup. I wasn't just helping her now. I was preparing for war. That night, Julia fell asleep on the couch, curled up with a blanket. Her body finally gave in to exhaustion. I didn't move her. I sat across the room, watching the shadows stretch across the floor, and remembered something I'd buried. About a year before we separated, I came home late from work. She was sitting at the table, staring at a broken wine glass on the floor. I'd forgotten our anniversary. We hadn't spoken all day. And I remember thinking, in that awful moment, this is how love ends. Not with screaming, with silence. But no, this wasn't silence. This was something deeper. Something more dangerous. I wasn't going to let it finish what we'd started to rebuild. I opened my laptop and began compiling a report. For the police, for the lawyer, for whoever needed it. Every detail mattered now, but one question kept echoing in the back of my mind. Why me? Why had Adrian wanted me to find him? Why had he chosen to escalate now? Julia wasn't his only target. Was part of the story now. And something told me he was far from finished. It started with a license plate. After Anton handed over the deactivated bugs and camera, he gave me one last gift. The make and model of the car, parked down the block from my building at 2:13 a.m., the time he believed the hidden camera in my living room had been installed. A dark gray 2017 Honda Accord. No visible damage, tinted windows, a dent above the rear wheel. The plate was partially visible in the reflection of a security camera in the alley. 4YR something. It wasn't much, but it was a thread. And I knew how to pull. Kevin, my contact in security, had a friend in DMV enforcement. I asked for a favor. No names, no reports. Just background. The car was registered to Adrian Leeds, but that was the first lie. There was no real Adrian Leeds in the state of California. The registration address traced to a P.O. box. The ID was fake. The email on file used a burner domain, one that deletes itself after 72 hours of inactivity. Appear ghost, except ghosts don't leave patterns, but this one had. I followed his digital trail, the screenshots, the metadata in the photos Julia had saved, the file names, the time zones. I cross-referenced image backgrounds with Google Maps, pinpointed where he might have been standing when he sent her that photo of her niece on the swings. It was Bakersfield, March 4th, which meant he'd driven 5 hours to take that picture. And then there were the others. In some of the photos, Julia wasn't even the subject. She was background, blurred in a reflection. The camera had been pointed at other people. Always women. Always alone. Something deeper was happening here. I spent the next 2 nights digging. Barely slept. I searched forums where survivors of stalking shared their stories. Looked up cases of coercion, non-violent control. What I found chilled me. 3 other women, all from the Bay Area, had posted anonymously on a closed subreddit for stalking survivors. Their language, it was identical. They mentioned someone named A. They mentioned gifts that felt like threats, photos that proved he was inside, and the worst one, he made my ex-husband think I cheated. It ended everything. I never even kissed Adrian. I messaged each of them, using a throwaway account. 2 replied. 1 agreed to talk. Her name was Lila. She met A at a meditation retreat near Santa Cruz. He went by Adam back then. Calm, intelligent, just intense enough to feel intriguing. She fell for him fast. He never touched her, but he slowly took over her life. Notes on her car windshield. Password reset requests. Her boss started getting anonymous emails claiming she was unstable. And then one day, her boyfriend of 4 years walked into their apartment and found Adam sitting at the table, calm as you like. She invited me. Adam had said, it was a lie, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. Lila ended up moving states. She filed a report, but with no hard evidence and no real name, nothing stuck. That was 2 years ago, which meant he'd been doing this for years, carefully, deliberately, isolating. Women, turning their partners against them, making sure no one could trust the story. It wasn't about sex or money. It was about control, psychological warfare. And I knew, with a kind of sick certainty, that Julia wasn't his last. She was. Just the one who fought back, and that made her dangerous. I printed everything I'd found. Created a new folder. Multiple victims' pattern behavior. I brought it to Julia that night. She was sitting on the floor, reading a book she wasn't really reading. Her eyes scanned the words, but they didn't stick. She looked like someone who was still waiting for the next bad thing to happen. I sat beside her, opened the file. "This isn't just about you," I said quietly. "He's done this before." She flipped through the pages, slowly, as if each new line was another nail driven into a coffin she thought had already been sealed. When she finished, she looked up at me with something different in her eyes. Not fear, resolve, so we expose him, she said. I nodded. But we do it smart. We don't go public. Not yet. We give the police everything, but through the right channels. And we prep for the backlash. Because the second he knows we're ahead of him, he'll escalate. She nodded. And then, almost as an afterthought, she asked, "Did he ever reach out to you?" The question caught me off guard. "No. Why?" She went quiet. Walked over to her purse, pulled out a small black notebook. She flipped to a page marked With a yellow sticky tab dot, there was handwriting. Not hers. It read, "He'll come back to you eventually. They always do. Just make sure you tell him everything, or he'll never forgive you. And if he doesn't forgive you, what will you have left?" It was dated 2 months ago. I felt like the floor shifted beneath me. "Julia," I whispered, "what didn't you tell me?" She closed the book, and with a trembling voice, she said, "There's something about us he knows. Something I never told you, because I was ashamed." I waited. She didn't speak. Not yet. Just walked to the window, staring into the night like it held the answer. But it didn't. She did. The wind outside was picking up. Street lights cast slow-moving shadows across the floor. I waited in silence, watching her shoulders rise and fall as she stood by the window, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Finally, she spoke. I was pregnant. "Ethan." I didn't move. It was before the divorce. Before we stopped even trying to be kind. I found out one morning in September, 2 weeks after that fight we had about the job offer in Chicago. I remembered that fight. Harsh words, thrown like grenades. I'd accused her of giving up on our future. She accused me of holding her back. It ended in silence. Days of it. Back then, we weaponized distance like professionals. "I didn't tell you," she said, turning toward me, her eyes already wet, "because I was scared. I didn't want to trap you. I thought if I told you and you stayed, it would be out of duty. And if you left, I wouldn't survive it." The words dug deep. I couldn't speak, couldn't think. "I lost it a few weeks later," she continued. "Barely had time to process it before it was gone. And by then we were already separating, so I buried it. Told myself it didn't matter, that maybe it was better this way." She looked down. But he knew, Adrian. Somehow, he knew. My mind reeled. The messages. The surveillance. The subtle barbs he'd thrown. The "what will you have left" in the notebook. It wasn't random. He wanted to control through shame, through secrets. And now I understood his angle. He didn't just want to ruin her relationships. He wanted to unravel her identity, twist every unresolved grief into a weapon. I stepped closer. "I wish you had told me," I said quietly. "But I'm not angry." She nodded. "That's not what he wants." "What does he want then?" "To watch us destroy each other." I turned the question over in my head again and again. Adrian had to be someone with access, not just to Julia, but to something inside her life. Her past, her pain. And then one detail clawed its way out of memory. Back when we were married, Julia used to mentor an intern at her nonprofit. Quiet guy, smart, always too helpful. He had once sent her flowers on her birthday, anonymously. We laughed about it. His name was Eli. I texted Kevin, "Can you run the name Eli Myerson, works in social services? Cross-check with any alias registrations linked to PO boxes in the Bay Area." It took an hour. The reply came in just after 1 a.m. Eli Myerson. Used a temp address to register 2 different shell LLCs. One as Adrian Leeds Consulting. Other as AM Protective Services. Same burner number linked to both. "That your guy?" I didn't answer, because I already knew. He'd been under our noses the entire time. Just watching. Waiting. We needed a confrontation. But not face-to-face. Not yet. So I sent him a message. One of the screenshots Julia had saved. A voicemail. Transcription. The one where he said, "Some people don't know what they've lost until it's watching them from the shadows." I forwarded it from an anonymous number, with one line underneath. "Your shadow is showing." It was bait. End. He bit. An hour later. Julia's phone lit up. Blocked number. Voicemail. She didn't want to listen. I did. I pressed play. His voice came through, no longer calm. still composed, but laced with tension. So, you're playing games now, bringing him back in, pretending you're strong. That's cute. But we both know that's not who you are. I gave you order. I gave you something to be afraid of, and you needed that. You think he'll save you? Ethan's a coward. He couldn't even look at you when you were breaking. I did. I watched every piece fall. I know you. Click. I stared at the phone. He was slipping. The narcissistic delusion, the belief that his version of reality was the only one that mattered, was beginning to crack. We could use that. We uploaded all the evidence. Julia's documentation, Anton's tech scans, my digital footprint trail, the confirmed pattern from the other victims, everything, and delivered it directly to a detective. Kevin trusted. Detective Sarah Lynn. Quiet, focused. She didn't make promises, but she listened. Hard. This is more than stalking, she said. This is psychological abuse with premeditated intent. If what you're showing holds up, we're talking about multiple felony charges, wire fraud, cyber harassment, unlawful, surveillance, interstate stalking. We left her office with a little less fear and a whole lot more purpose. That night, Julia slept in the bed for the first time. She still kept the light on. I stayed on the couch, but neither of us really slept. We just existed, waiting for something to move. At 4:12 a.m., the apartment buzzer rang. 3 times. Then silence. I got up, looked through the PEEPHOLE. Nothing. Just a small white envelope taped to the door. Inside was a note, typed, "You can't build something whole from pieces that never fit." And beneath it, a photo of me. Holding Julia. Taken hours ago. My fingers began to tremble. But inside, underneath the fear, something else stirred. It's his last move. He was unraveling, losing control, showing desperation. And soon, he'd break. It all ended in a diner. Not in a courtroom. Not in handcuffs. Just a weathered booth off Highway 24. The kind with greasy menus and chipped mugs, where the coffee tastes like cardboard and the clocks don't bother ticking right. Detective Lynn had set it up, a sting carefully orchestrated. We didn't use hidden wires or dramatic last-minute reveals. Just psychology, leverage. Julia. Adrian Eli thought she wanted to meet. She texted him that morning, using the same subtle language he had trained her to use. Obedient, soft, contrite. You were right. I panicked. He's gone now. Please. Let me explain. I'll come alone. Just give me 10 minutes. He replied within 5 minutes. You finally remembered who you are. 3 p.m. Merle's Diner. Bring your apology. That was his mistake. Julia didn't come alone. We watched from a car 2 blocks away, while 2 officers sat in the booth beside him, dressed as truckers. Lynn was already in the back, sipping cold tea. I saw him walk in. Calm, confident, the kind of calm you only find in someone who believes he's untouchable. Like this was just another episode in a drama he'd written. He waited 11 minutes. Then Julia stepped inside. I'll never forget the way she walked. Shoulders high, hair tied back, wearing the same sweater from the night she called me. But this time, she wore it like armor. He smiled when he saw her. That same eerie, patient grin. You look tired, he said. She sat across from him. You look smaller than I remember. His jaw twitched. She pulled out a folder. Do you want to see what I've learned about you? He scoffed. That's not how this works. No, she said. Not anymore. And with that, Detective Lynn stood up, walked over, and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. Mr. Myerson, you're under arrest for multiple counts of criminal harassment, unlawful surveillance, cyberstalking, and attempted coercive control. His reaction? Nothing. Not panic, just a smirk. As if he still believed this was temporary. That she'd crack. That I'd walk away again. That someone would forget the details. But no one did. Not this time. The trial was quiet. Most psychological abuse cases are. There were no dramatic gasps, no shouted objections. Just evidence, witnesses, a long, painful unpacking of all the threads he'd pulled for years. Julia testified. Brave, clear. She never once looked away. So did the other women. One by one, they stood, and the more they spoke, the more human they became again. Not victims. Not broken things. Survivors. He was sentenced to 12 years without parole, with pending federal charges still under review. But the real justice didn't come from the cell door, clanking shut. It came from watching Julia walk out of the courtroom into the sunlight and exhale. I asked her once weeks later how she felt when she saw him being led away. She said, like I was finally breathing with my own lungs again. We didn't fall back into love overnight. There were no perfect endings. No kissing in the rain or sweeping declarations. But we started talking again. Really talking. I told her about the guilt I carried. The nights I stayed awake, wondering what I could have done differently. She told me about the quiet strength she found when she realized no one was coming to save her, and how, when I showed up that night, part of her realized she still mattered. We started walking together in the evenings. Just blocks at first, then neighborhoods, then places that used to mean something to us. A diner, a park bench, the bookstore where I first asked her out. We talked, we cried, not just each other. Ourselves. Months passed. She moved into her own apartment, bright, airy, filled with plants. Her laugh came back slowly, like a song remembered after years of silence. And me? I stopped punishing myself. I learned that being a man isn't about control or fixing things. It's about presence. Staying. Even when it's hard, especially then. Still see each other. Sometimes as friends, sometimes with something more in our eyes. But there's no pressure now. No expectations. Just grace. That's the word I come back to over and over. Grace for the years we lost. Grace for the versions of ourselves we had to outgrow. Grace for the second chance we didn't even know we wanted. And if you ask me now what I learned through all of it, it's this. Love isn't proven in the good times. It's proven in the wreckage. When you show up, when you stay, when you choose not to run from the pieces, but to kneel beside them and say, let's build something true, even if it's new. Epilogue. 1 year later, Julia published an article last fall about coercive control, about the power of silence, about reclaiming your name when someone tries to write your story for you. It went viral, not because it was polished. But because it was honest. She started a foundation 2 months ago to help other women track digital abuse. She called it Red Thread after the stitch in that old sweater. And me? I showed up to her launch event. Stood in the back, watched her speak, and I knew whether we ever found our way back to each other fully or not, that night she called me was never about saving her. It was about waking up. Both of us. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel. It really helps. Click the video on the screen, and I'll see you there.